It is one of the most painful feelings in the world when you begin to sense that someone you love is slowly slipping away from you. Not all at once, not with a dramatic argument or a sudden goodbye. It happens quietly, almost so quietly that you question whether it is happening at all. The strange thing is that your heart usually notices these changes long before your mind is willing to accept them. Something feels different. The conversations don't feel the same. The warmth that once came naturally now feels forced. You find yourself replaying interactions in your head, searching for an explanation that will make everything make sense. Deep down, a part of you already knows something has changed, but another part of you desperately wants to believe that everything is still okay. Most people imagine that relationships end with a clear moment. They picture a breakup conversation, a final argument, or a painful goodbye. Real life is often much more confusing than that. Many relationships begin ending long before anyone says the words out loud. A person can still answer your texts. They can still sit beside you at dinner. They can still show up physically while slowly disappearing emotionally. This is what makes it so difficult to recognize. You keep looking at their presence while missing the change in their effort. You keep focusing on the fact that they are still there while ignoring the growing distance between who they used to be and who they are becoming. What makes this even harder is that love naturally wants to see the best in people. When we care deeply about someone, we become very good at explaining away things that hurt us. We tell ourselves they are stressed. We tell ourselves they are tired. We tell ourselves they have a lot on their mind. Sometimes those explanations are true. Life can become overwhelming. People go through difficult seasons. But there comes a point when the explanations stop bringing comfort and start creating confusion. Instead of helping you understand what is happening, they prevent you from seeing it clearly. Many good-hearted people stay trapped in this space for months or even years. They continue loving the person they remember, instead of accepting the person standing in front of them. They hold on to old memories, old promises, and old versions of the relationship because those things feel safer than facing the truth. The problem is that hope can sometimes become a hiding place. Instead of helping us move forward, it keeps us stuck in a reality that no longer exists. We keep waiting for things to return to how they were while ignoring the evidence that they already changed. That is why this conversation is so important. Not because I want to convince you that someone is leaving. Not because I want you to feel afraid. The purpose is much simpler than that. I want to help you see clearly because confusion is exhausting. Wondering where you stand every day is exhausting. Constantly questioning yourself, your value, and your place in someone's life can slowly wear down even the strongest person. Sometimes the truth hurts, but the confusion hurts longer. Today we're going to talk about the quiet changes that often appear when someone's heart is no longer fully invested in the relationship. These changes rarely arrive all at once. They appear gradually, like cracks forming in a wall. Easy to ignore at first, easy to explain away, but over time they become impossible to miss. And once you understand what those changes look like, you stop blaming yourself for things that were never yours to carry. You stop chasing answers from people who have already stopped giving them. Most importantly, you begin creating space for the truth, even when that truth is difficult to accept. The first real sign often appears so quietly that most people miss it. There is no dramatic event, no shocking betrayal, no obvious moment where everything changes. Instead, you begin noticing something much smaller. The person who once cared deeply about how their actions affected you starts caring less and less. At first, it is easy to dismiss. Maybe they forgot something important. Maybe they were distracted. Maybe they had a difficult day. But over time, these moments stop feeling like exceptions and start feeling like a pattern. And patterns tell us far more than isolated incidents ever will. When someone truly values having you in their life, your feelings matter to them. Not because they are perfect, but because they care about the connection. They care when they accidentally hurt you. They care when you seem upset. They care when something feels unresolved between the two of you. Even during disagreements, there is usually an effort to repair the damage. There is a desire to restore closeness. They may not always know the right thing to say, but you can feel that your emotions still matter to them. That care becomes one of the strongest foundations of any healthy relationship because it creates emotional safety. But when someone begins emotionally pulling away, one of the first things to disappear is that sense of care. Suddenly, your feelings seem less important than they used to be. Concerns that once led to meaningful conversations now get brushed aside. Questions that once received thoughtful answers now receive short responses or no response at all. You bring up something that hurt you, and instead of trying to understand, they become annoyed that you mentioned it. Instead of working through the issue together, they act as though your emotions are an inconvenience. This shift can be incredibly painful because it leaves you feeling unseen. What makes this so confusing is that many people immediately turn the blame inward. They start wondering if they are asking for too much. Maybe they are too sensitive. Maybe they are too emotional. Maybe they should stop bringing things up altogether. Over time, they begin shrinking their own needs just to avoid creating conflict. They stop expressing disappointment. They stop asking questions. They stop sharing concerns. Not because those concerns disappeared, but because they learned that expressing them no longer leads anywhere. This is often the moment when people begin losing pieces of themselves while trying to save a relationship. The truth is that wanting kindness, communication, and emotional consideration is not asking for too much. Those things are not luxuries. They are the foundation of any meaningful connection. A healthy relationship should not leave you constantly questioning whether your feelings matter. It should not leave you afraid to speak honestly. It should not leave you carrying emotional burdens alone while the other person acts indifferent. When someone genuinely wants you in their life, they may not always agree with you, but they still care about how their actions affect you. This is why emotional confusion can be such an important signal. Not because every difficult week means something is wrong, but because persistent confusion often reveals a deeper problem. People who love you may occasionally hurt you, but they usually care enough to repair the damage. When someone repeatedly leaves you hurt, uncertain, and emotionally abandoned without making any effort to understand or reconnect, it becomes harder to ignore what their behavior is. Sometimes the loudest sign that a person's heart is drifting away is not what they say. It is how little concern they show when they know you are hurting. The second change is often even harder to accept because it does not feel cruel. It feels passive. It feels quiet. It feels like watching someone slowly stop reaching for you. Relationships survive because two people continue choosing each other over and over again. Not just in the beginning when everything feels exciting, but in the ordinary moments too. In the texts sent during busy days. In the effort to stay connected. In the small gestures that say, "You still matter to me." When that effort begins disappearing, the relationship may still exist on the surface, but something important underneath it starts weakening. At first, the changes can seem small enough to ignore. The conversations become shorter, the excitement disappears from their voice. Plans become less frequent. The enthusiasm they once had for spending time with you fades into something that feels routine or forced. You begin noticing that most interactions only happen because you created them. If you don't send the first message, nothing arrives. If you don't suggest spending time together, it never happens. If you don't keep the conversation moving, it slowly dies. Without realizing it, you have become the engine carrying the entire relationship forward. This is where many loving people become trapped. Because they care deeply, they start working even harder. They send more messages. They make more plans. They become more patient. They become more understanding. They convince themselves that if they can just love a little better, communicate a little better, or try a little harder, things will return to the way they used to be. The heartbreaking reality is that effort only works when both people are participating. One person's dedication cannot permanently replace two people's commitment. No matter how much love you pour into something, it cannot thrive if the other person has stopped contributing altogether. A relationship does not stay alive because one person refuses to give up. It stays alive because both people continue investing in it. That is why effort matters so much. Effort is often more honest than words. Someone can tell you they care. Someone can promise that everything is fine. Someone can reassure you with beautiful language. But effort reveals what words cannot hide. It shows where attention is going. It shows what matters. It shows who is still fighting for the connection and who is quietly stopped. Over time, effort becomes one of the clearest indicators of emotional investment. The most painful part is that this process happens gradually. There is rarely a single moment where you can point and say, everything changed right there. Instead, you wake up one day and realize you feel lonely even though you're still in a relationship. You realize that most of the energy, planning, communication, and emotional labor has been coming from you. You realize that if you stopped reaching out completely, the relationship might simply drift into silence. Not because of a dramatic ending, but because you were the only one keeping it alive. That realization hurts because it forces you to confront something difficult. Love cannot survive on one person's effort forever. You cannot carry a bridge by yourself. Eventually, exhaustion catches up with you. And when it does, you begin understanding a truth that many people spend years avoiding. The problem is not that you didn't love enough. The problem is that you were trying to build a future with someone who had already stopped helping you build it. And once you see that clearly, you begin preparing yourself for the final sign. The one that often reveals that someone's heart has already started leaving long before their body ever does. The third change is often the clearest one. Yet, it is also the easiest to overlook when your heart is still holding on. It appears when the future slowly stops including you. The future is a very revealing thing because people naturally make room for what they want to keep. When someone loves having you in their life, they usually talk about tomorrow without even thinking about it. They mention trips they want to take with you. They talk about holidays, birthdays, plans, and about holidays, birthdays, plans, and goals. They imagine experiences that have not happened yet, and in those images you are standing beside them. It feels natural because you have become part of the way they see their life unfolding. This is why changes in future language can be so revealing. At first, you may not notice it. Conversations that once included words like we, us, and our begin sounding different. Future plans become vague. Excitement about upcoming experiences fades. The person who once talked freely about next month, next year, or even next weekend suddenly becomes uncertain whenever those subjects come up. Nothing dramatic happens. There is no announcement. There is simply an absence, a quiet disappearance of the future you once shared together. What makes this difficult to recognize is that people often focus entirely on the present. They tell themselves that everything must be okay because the relationship still exists today. The texts still arrive, the conversations still happen, the routines remain mostly unchanged. But relationships are not built only in the present moment. Healthy relationships are constantly reaching forward. They are always creating new memories before they happen. They are always making room for shared experiences that have not arrived yet. When someone stops doing that, something important has shifted beneath the surface. Imagine a tree growing healthy and strong. It naturally reaches outward. It expands. It creates new outward. It expands. It creates new branches. Relationships work in much the same way. They grow toward the future. They make plans. They create possibilities. They develop dreams. When that growth stops, the relationship often becomes stuck in place. Conversations stay trapped in the present because one person is no longer imagining a shared tomorrow. Instead of building something together, they begin focusing only on themselves. Their future becomes an individual story rather than a shared one. You might notice this in subtle ways. You suggest a trip a few months from now, and they immediately change the subject. You bring up a future event, and they respond with uncertainty instead of enthusiasm. You try to make plans together, and their answers feel hesitant or non-committal. None of these moments alone prove anything, but when they happen repeatedly, they begin telling a story. A story that words often refuse to tell directly, because people rarely sit down and announce that they no longer see you in their future. More often, they simply stop creating one with you. This is why the absence of future planning can feel so painful. It creates a strange kind of loneliness. The person is still standing beside you, yet somehow you feel left behind. You realize that while you were still imagining a shared future, they may already be imagining something different. And that realization hurts because it forces you to confront a possibility you never wanted to face. Sometimes people leave emotionally long before they leave physically. Sometimes they stop building the future before they stop showing up in the present. And once that happens, the distance between two people can grow wider every day, even while they continue sitting in the same room together. There is another truth that makes this kind of situation so painful, and it is something most people do not realize until much later. When someone begins emotionally withdrawing from a relationship, you do not only lose the person, you slowly begin losing yourself as well. Not all at once, not in a dramatic way. It happens little by little. You spend so much time trying to understand what changed that you stop paying attention to what is happening inside you. Your focus shifts completely toward them. What are they thinking? Why are they acting this way? Did I do something acting this way? Did I do something wrong? What can I do to fix it? Before you know it, your entire emotional world revolves around solving a puzzle that may not even have an answer. This is why emotional withdrawal can be so exhausting. You are not just carrying the sadness of losing someone. You are carrying uncertainty every single day. Human beings can handle difficult truths better than endless confusion. At least when you know where you stand, you can begin healing. But when someone stays physically present while emotionally disappearing, your mind gets trapped in a cycle of hope and disappointment. One good conversation convinces you things are improving. One cold interaction makes you feel hopeless again. You spend weeks riding an emotional roller coaster that never seems to stop. Many people respond to this by working harder. They become more attentive, more patient, more forgiving. They convince themselves that if they can just be understanding enough, loving enough, or supportive enough, the relationship will return to what it once was. The heartbreaking part is that this effort often comes from a beautiful place. It comes from loyalty. It comes from love. It comes from a genuine desire to save something meaningful. But there is a difference between fighting for a relationship and carrying it entirely by yourself. One is partnership, the other is survival. Think about how much energy it takes to constantly monitor another person's feelings, to analyze every text message, to search for hidden meaning in every conversation, to wonder whether a delayed reply means something is wrong, to question whether a lack of enthusiasm means they are losing interest. Eventually, you become emotionally exhausted, not because you stopped loving them, but because you have been carrying the emotional weight of two people. No relationship was designed to function that way for very long. What makes this even more difficult is that the person pulling away often does not fully understand what they are doing. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't. But regardless of their awareness, the result is often the same. You begin feeling lonely inside a relationship. You begin feeling unseen. You begin feeling as though your efforts disappear into a void, and because there was no dramatic ending, you keep waiting for clarity that never arrives. You keep hoping the version of them you miss will somehow return. This is why one of the most important questions you can ask yourself is not how do I make them stay? The better question is what is this situation doing to me? Is it bringing peace into your life or anxiety? Is it creating security or confusion? Is it helping you grow or slowly draining your spirit? Because sometimes the greatest damage is not losing another person. Sometimes the greatest damage is losing yourself while trying to hold on to someone who has already started letting go. And recognizing that truth is often the first step toward protecting your own heart again. One of the hardest things to accept is that love alone cannot keep a relationship alive. Many people grow up believing that if two people care about each other enough, they will find a way through anything. It is a beautiful idea, and in some ways it is true. Love is incredibly powerful, but love without effort eventually becomes a memory instead of a reality. Love without communication becomes confusion. Love clears without commitment becomes distance. This is why so many people find themselves heartbroken even though they still love the other person deeply. The love may still exist somewhere inside them, but the relationship itself is no longer being fed by the actions that keep it alive. When someone starts emotionally leaving, there's often a period where you can feel yourself fighting for both people. You become the one keeping conversations going. You become the one reaching out after disagreements. You become the one trying to create moments of connection when everything feels cold. At first, you do it willingly, because relationships naturally go through difficult seasons. Every healthy relationship experiences moments when one person needs a little more support than the other. The problem begins when that season never ends, when weeks become months and months become years. Eventually, what felt like support starts feeling like sacrifice, and what felt like partnership starts feeling like loneliness. Many people remain in this situation because they are terrified of what acceptance might mean. Acceptance feels dangerous because it forces you to stop hiding behind hope. As long as you believe things will return to normal tomorrow, you do not have to face the possibility that they may never return at all. Hope can be comforting, but it can also become a place where we delay reality. We convince ourselves that the next conversation will fix everything. The next date night will bring back the spark. The next month will somehow be The next month will somehow be different. Meanwhile, the emotional distance continues growing, and the connection becomes weaker with each passing day. This is why paying attention to patterns matters so much. Anyone can have a bad week. Anyone can become distracted by stress. Anyone can go through a difficult period where they are not showing up as their best self. Healthy relationships can survive those moments because the foundation remains intact. The care is still there. The desire to reconnect is still there. The effort eventually returns. Emotional withdrawal is different. It is not temporary. It is a gradual reduction in care, effort, and investment that continues over time. The relationship survives only because one person keeps carrying it. What makes this realization so painful is that it often arrives long after your heart already knew the truth. Deep down, many people recognize the signs long before they are willing to acknowledge them. They notice the distance. They notice the lack of effort. They notice the missing future. They notice the missing future conversations. But admitting those things means confronting loss, and loss is confronting loss, and loss is frightening. So they keep waiting. They keep hoping. They keep giving more of themselves to someone who is giving less and less, and someone who is giving less and less in return. Over time, this imbalance creates a sadness that can become overwhelming because it leaves you feeling unwanted in a place where you once felt deeply loved. The truth is that no relationship can survive indefinitely on one person's effort. No amount of patience, understanding, or sacrifice can permanently replace mutual investment. Love was never meant to be carried by one person alone. It was always meant to be shared. And while accepting that reality may hurt, it also creates something important. It creates clarity. Because once you stop trying to carry the entire relationship by yourself, you finally gain the ability to see it for what it truly is, rather than what you desperately wish it could become. The moment many people finally begin seeing the truth is not when the other person leaves. It is when they become too exhausted to keep pretending that everything is fine. There comes a point where your heart simply cannot carry the weight anymore. You wake up one morning and realize that you are tired. Not tired from work, not tired from life, tired from constantly trying to save something that no longer feels mutual. Tired from wondering where you stand. Tired from analyzing every conversation. Tired from giving more and more of yourself while receiving less and less in return. It is a kind of exhaustion that reaches deep into your spirit because it comes from loving someone who no longer seems to be meeting you in the middle. What makes this stage so difficult is that many people confuse acceptance with giving up. They think that acknowledging the truth means they did not fight hard. The truth means they did not fight hard enough. They think that seeing reality clearly somehow makes them disloyal. But there is a difference between giving up on someone and accepting what they are showing you. Acceptance is not weakness. It is the willingness to stop arguing with what is happening right in front of you. It is the courage to admit that love cannot survive in the same way when only one person is feeding it. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop forcing yourself to believe something your heart already knows is changing. One of the clearest signs that you have been carrying too much is when the relationship begins affecting your sense of self-worth. You start measuring your value through another person's attention. A delayed response ruins your day. A cold interaction makes you question yourself. A lack of effort makes you wonder if you are enough. This is one of the saddest things that can happen during emotional withdrawal because the relationship stops being about connection and starts becoming about validation. Instead of asking whether the relationship is healthy, you begin asking whether you are worthy. Those are two very different questions, and confusing them can keep you trapped for a long time. The reality is that someone's inability or unwillingness to invest in the relationship does not determine your worth. It never has. People pull away for many reasons. Some lose interest. Some become emotionally lose interest. Some become emotionally unavailable. Some stop fighting for the connection. Some simply change. None of those things erase your value as a person. Yet when we love deeply, it is easy to take another person's withdrawal personally. We assume their distance must mean something is wrong with us. We search ourselves for flaws. We replay conversations looking for mistakes. We become detectives in our own heartbreak. Meanwhile, the truth may be much simpler. The relationship changed because the relationship changed. This is why healing often begins long before the relationship officially ends. Healing begins the moment you stop chasing explanations that may never come. It begins when you stop making excuses for patterns that continue hurting you. It begins when you stop sacrificing your peace in exchange for temporary hope. None of this means becoming bitter. None of this means closing your heart. It simply means respecting yourself enough to acknowledge what your experience has been trying to tell you for a very long time, and perhaps that is the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the person you are fighting for is no longer fighting for the relationship in the same way. Sometimes the love you are trying to preserve exists more in memory than in preserve. That truth hurts because it forces you to let go of the version of the relationship you wanted, but it also creates the possibility of freedom. Because the moment you stop carrying the relationship alone, you finally have the strength to start carrying yourself again. And that is often where the real healing begins. There is a moment that often arrives after weeks, months, or even years of confusion when something inside you begins to change. The questions that once consumed your mind start losing their power. Not because you suddenly stop caring, but because you become tired of living in uncertainty. You become tired of waking up every day wondering where you stand. You become tired of searching for hidden meaning in every message, every conversation, every silence. Little by little, you begin realizing that no answer another person gives you can create peace if their actions continue creating doubt. That realization is painful, but it is also incredibly important because it marks the beginning of clarity. For a long time, many people believe that closure will come from the other person. They imagine a conversation where everything is finally explained. They hope for honesty, understanding, and answers that make the pain easier to carry. Sometimes that conversation happens. Many times it does not. In reality, some people leave without ever fully explaining why. Some people slowly drift away and never acknowledge the distance they created. Others avoid difficult conversations altogether because facing them would require confronting uncomfortable truths. Waiting for perfect closure can keep you emotionally trapped because it places your healing in someone else's hands. This is why so many people remain stuck long after the relationship has already changed. They continue searching for certainty from the same person who created the uncertainty. They continue asking for reassurance from someone who stopped providing it long ago. They continue hoping for effort from someone who has already withdrawn it. Every day becomes another attempt to recover something that no longer exists in the same form. And because the relationship has not officially ended, they convince themselves there is still something left to save. Sometimes there is, but sometimes what remains is not love. Sometimes what remains is only hope. One of the most powerful shifts that can happen is when you stop focusing entirely on what the other person is doing and begin paying attention to what you are experiencing. Are you feeling loved or constantly anxious? Do you feel secure or perpetually uncertain? Do your interactions leave you feeling connected or emotionally drained? These questions matter because your experience tells a story too. Often we become so focused on understanding another person's behavior that we stop listening to our own emotional reality. We stop noticing how much pain we are carrying because we are too busy trying to fix what is causing it. There is nothing selfish about protecting your own peace. There is nothing selfish about acknowledging that a relationship is hurting you. In fact, one of the most loving things you can do for yourself is to stop ignoring what your heart has been trying to communicate. Your feelings are not obstacles to overcome. They are information. They are signals pointing toward what is healthy and what is not. The problem is that many people spend so long dismissing those signals that they no longer trust themselves. They trust excuses more than evidence. They trust hope more than experience. And this is where healing starts becoming possible. Not because the pain disappears overnight. Not because everything suddenly makes sense. Healing begins when you stop abandoning yourself in order to hold on to someone else. It begins when you stop treating your own needs as less important than keeping the relationship alive. It begins when you realize that your worth does not depend on convincing another person to stay. The moment you understand that, something remarkable happens. The relationship may still hurt, the loss may still hurt, but you stop losing yourself inside it. And that is often the first real step toward finding your way back to peace. One of the most difficult parts of letting go is accepting that love and reality are not always the same thing. You can love someone deeply and still recognize that the relationship is no longer healthy. You can care about someone with all your heart and still acknowledge that they are no longer showing up in the way they once did. Many people struggle with this because they believe that if love still exists inside them, then they should keep fighting no matter what. They convince themselves that walking away means the love was not real. But sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes the deepest act of love is accepting what is real instead of endlessly chasing what used to be. The truth is that relationships are not sustained by feelings alone. Feelings may begin a relationship, but choices keep it alive. Every day, people choose whether they will communicate, whether they will show care, whether they will protect the connection, and whether they will continue building a future together. When those choices disappear, the relationship begins changing regardless of how much love one person still carries in their heart. This is why so many people feel trapped between what they feel and what they see. Their heart remembers the love, their eyes see the distance. Their memories tell one story while their present reality tells another. Many people spend years waiting for someone to become who they used to be. They replay old memories because those memories feel safer than the truth. They remember the laughter, the closeness, the excitement, and They remember the version of the person who once made them feel special. The problem is that memories can become powerful illusions. They keep us emotionally connected to the past while preventing us from seeing the present clearly. Instead of asking whether the relationship is healthy today, we keep comparing today to who the person was years ago. In doing so, we remain attached to a version of them that may no longer exist. What makes this especially painful is that hope often disguises itself as loyalty. We tell ourselves we are being patient. We tell ourselves we are standing by someone we love. We tell ourselves we are giving them time to find their way, or giving them time to find their way back. Sometimes those things are true, but sometimes hope becomes a way of postponing grief. Instead of mourning what has already changed, we keep waiting for it to change back. Meanwhile, the emotional distance continues growing, and the relationship survives mostly because we refuse to let go of what it once was. There comes a moment when you must ask yourself a difficult question. Are you loving the relationship you actually have? Or are you loving the memory of the relationship you used to have? That question can feel uncomfortable because it forces honesty. It forces you to compare reality with hope. It forces you to stop focusing on potential and start looking at patterns. The answer may hurt, but it can also set you free, because healing becomes possible only when we stop confusing memories with reality and start accepting what is happening right now. And perhaps that is one of the bravest things a person can do. To stop chasing the past. To stop waiting for someone else to become who they used to be. To stop carrying a relationship that requires two people when only one person is still holding on. Acceptance does not mean you never loved. Acceptance does not mean you never loved them. Acceptance does not erase the beautiful moments you shared. It simply means you respect yourself enough to stop building your future around someone who has stopped building theirs around you. And that realization, painful as it may be, often becomes the doorway to a healthier and more peaceful chapter of your life. As we come to the end of this conversation, there is one thing I hope you carry with you. If someone is slowly walking away from your life, it does not mean you failed. It does not mean you were not good enough. It does not mean you were too loving, too caring, or too loyal. One of the greatest mistakes people make during heartbreak is turning another person's withdrawal into a judgment of their own worth. They assume that because someone stopped choosing them, there must be something wrong with them. But another person's inability to see your value does not erase the value that already exists. Your worth was never created by their attention, and it does not disappear because that attention changed. The reality is that people change. Relationships change, feelings change. Sometimes two people grow together, sometimes they grow apart. As painful as that truth can be, it is part of being that truth can be. It is part of being human. What matters most is how you respond when those changes happen. You can spend years chasing explanations, trying to convince someone to love you the way they once did. Or you can slowly begin turning that energy back toward yourself. You can begin rebuilding the parts of yourself that became exhausted from carrying a relationship alone. You can begin remembering who you were before confusion became part of your daily life. Many people stay trapped because they believe letting go means giving up. But letting go is not the same thing as giving up. Giving up comes from hopelessness. Letting go comes from acceptance. It comes from recognizing that you cannot force another person to invest in a relationship. You cannot make someone care. You cannot love enough for two people. The hardest lesson in relationships is often learning that effort must be mutual. Love must be mutual. Commitment must be mutual. No matter how wonderful you are, you cannot create a healthy relationship by yourself. What makes this so difficult is that your heart will often continue loving someone long after your mind begins seeing the truth. That is normal. Healing is rarely a straight line. Some days you will miss them. Some days you will question yourself. Some days you will remember the good moments and wonder whether things could have been different. Be patient with yourself during those moments. Grief is not proof that you made the wrong decision. It is proof that what you had mattered to you. The fact that you cared deeply is not a weakness. It is one of the most beautiful things about you. But while you are grieving what was lost, do not forget to pay attention to what remains. You are still here. Your kindness is still here. Your loyalty is still here. Your ability to love is still here. The relationship may have changed, but those qualities did not disappear. In fact, they are the very things that will help you build healthier connections in the future. The goal is not to become colder or harder because someone disappointed you. The goal is to become wiser, to learn how to recognize mutual effort, to learn how to value yourself enough to stop chasing people who are no longer walking beside you. So before we finish, I want you to remember this. When someone truly wants you in their life, you should not have to spend every day wondering whether you matter. You should not have to carry the entire relationship on your shoulders. Real love is not perfect, but it is shared. It is built by two people who continue choosing each other even during difficult seasons. If this message resonated with you, comment the word worthy below. I would love to know who stayed with me until the end. And if you have ever experienced the pain of loving someone who slowly pulled away, know that you are not alone. Subscribe to Maya Bennett for more conversations about relationships, healing, self-worth, and emotional growth. Until next time, remember this. When someone walks away from your life, it does not mean you lost your value. Sometimes it simply means you are finally making room for the people who will stay.